I shouldn't say that, a minister from, a Dutch minister. How could I say, where are you? Thank you for joining us. From your perspective, what do you see, given where you find yourself, both as a government but also as a player in the EU, the European community, the priorities for a renewed social contract?
Yes, thank you. And thank you to talk today about that new social contract, because I think that's very essential to the discussions that we are having, not just in the Netherlands, but in Europe. And social contract is the idea that the legitimacy of a government is based on the consent of the governed. And that's actually a product of our shared history. The reason I start there, and that's with Rousseau, he conceived the idea of a social contract in response to a divided Europe a century and a half ago. And over the years, we've developed that into the European Union that we are today. And the European Union that is prosperous, and where in most cases we do have a strong social protection. That makes us unique as a social market economy. However, we are at risk. Our social contract that lies at the basis of our prosperity lies at risk. We see structural inequalities. We see fault lines in our societies that put pressure on our ability to build cohesive societies. People feel left behind. People feel that their interests are not taken into account, that we don't hear their voices. And we're facing great challenges at the same time: climate change, migration, digitalization, aging population, and of course, most recent, first war in Ukraine, now in the Middle East, in Israel, Gaza. We need a strong and united Europe and to play a role in the world. But we also need a strong, cohesive society to be able to deal with all those challenges. And at the moment, we are not building a society where we leave nobody behind. We're not building a society where we actually give middle classes perspective, that if they work really hard, they will have a better future, their children will have a better future. That's not what we're providing today, and that's what we need to change. And I often say it in the Netherlands can only do well if everyone prospers. And the same goes for Europe. If not all our citizens feel that they're part of society, then we cannot prosper as Europe. So, to go back to your question, what do I think are the priorities for the new Commission? Well, the overall message, I think, it's all about people. And sometimes we tend to forget that. We're talking about rules and regulations and businesses, and we need businesses. I come from the business world. But when you talk about people, my first priority is fair labor mobility. Free movement of people and services has brought us a lot. But the way we treat EU labor migrants within our own countries is not worthy of the European Union. What I've seen in the Netherlands, a very wealthy country, the way we treat people from Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, you name it, it doesn't fit with the model that we stand for. We don't treat people as human beings, we treat them as workforce. We house them badly and we don't pay them what they ought to. One way to turn that around is the upcoming discussion on the mandate for the European Labour Authority. For those who are involved in that, let's strengthen that mandate. And especially, let's make sure the ELA can do something about the posting of third country nationals, because that's where we really lose grip on migration. The second priority is about safe and healthy and fair work and modern labour laws. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's a Dutch saying. And it actually means we have to put far more focus on prevention. And last week, as the Netherlands, we stated that we want 0 death at work in 2040. That's a big ambition. That goes to hazardous materials. That goes to mental health at work. We need to get serious about that, by the way. So that's one part of it. And the other part is, as James was alluding to, our labor laws are outdated. The world has changed. Digitalization, hybrid working, algorithmic management. So also let's get serious about that platform directive. We need to get that done. We need to protect the people that work in the platform economy in a much better way than we do today. Thirdly, we can only address these challenges and we can only give people perspective if they have the skills to do so. if they have the education. So lifelong learning, and it's the European Years of the Skills, we need to invest in much more than we do today. And finally, my fourth priority, and it's the overarching priority, is about equity and equitable opportunities. If we're honest with each other today, we all like to recruit, promote, hire, have coffee with, give the greatest project to somebody who looks like us and is 5 years younger. I like to recruit a junior version of myself because it's much easier. But that means that we leave people with a migrant background, people who are 55 plus, pregnant women, you name it, people with a culturally diverse opinion. We leave them out of our equitable opportunities. We leave them out of our societies. And we need inclusive societies. And we know that diverse teams perform better, but we don't act upon it. We know we need inclusive societies, but we don't do it. But we can start by it today. So my question to you is, when you're back in your offices tomorrow, who are you going to invite for coffee? Is it somebody like yourself, but 5 years younger? Or is it somebody who's really different, with a different opinion, with a different background? Because that's where diversity and that's where inclusion starts.
Indeed, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to pause you because I'm running out of time already, and I'm sorry for that. But it's a powerful note for you, to conclude your initial contribution. Ultimately, this is about behaviour and mindset, and it'll be interesting to know whether you're able to convince your fellow cabinet colleagues in the Dutch government of what you're saying, but also previously when we had dear Mark at the council, what kind of conversation they had, because we know that whenever gender equality directive or other matters on social equity were put up, the council basically blocked it or delayed it, and we know what the gender makeup is, and also the demographic, because we're talking about. Excuse older men in the room, I'm an older man too, but a general demographic of older men coming from a particular background and a particular circle that actually felt that politics should be done in a particular way. Yep. And those things don't matter. So it'd be interesting to see whether you're able to convert your cabinet and your government in the way that you're describing. But we'll come back to you, and that will be a bit of a challenge when I do. Maria, thank you for joining us also.
Hello.
Hello. You're 2/3 into your presidency, and obviously, dear old Pedro's having a bit of a tough time at the moment, which is a real shame. But you are a very well-known government for, I suppose, promoting a social welfare model in various ways over time, given the history of Spain. Where do you given where you are now in 2/3 of the presidency, what have you been doing as a government to promote this agenda, firstly? And then, I suppose, my second question is, and if you can be brief about this, is that what's Spain's vision for a future of Europe? And I don't mean that in a naff, romantic way. Seriously, what is it that Spain would like out of a future Europe? Over to you.
I'm gonna answer you. Well, for the first question, it is evident that we need a more competitive economy. But from our point of view, it's vital that that economy will be fair and looks after its citizens. We have done specific things, which had.
Yeah, Maria. Yeah? Oh, good. Okay,
yes.
Carry on, sorry.
Yeah, a direct impact on the cost of living for citizens. It's the case of the reform of the electricity market. Of course, we appreciated from the very beginning. It was because of that we asked for ourselves, and afterwards it was extended the Iberian solution to capping gas prices. That was going to have a huge impact in the citizens. That is one of the main causes of inflation. The reform, as you know, aims to make electricity price less dependent on this volatile regime, so that is something very particular. But James was talking about the model of welfareness. That for us is very important, because it's true that the European society has suffered a decade of successive crises that we were talking about, but they have left the scars. Those scores are very important, So, I mean, a key element in this objective, for example, to try to promote the welfare state is to promote European tax justice, that we are very much in that. And we are very conscious of what the Dutch minister was saying as well, I mean, of course, the United Europe, and the fact of not leaving nobodies behind, So we're attending great importance to groups of people that perhaps they were not taken so much into account. Is the case of disabled, So I mean, we will try at the end of this month to get a common approach to get an European disability card. We are very much involved in everything related to less populated areas that we have a lot, but other member states do as well, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's very idyllic, to see someone working with his computer or her computer in the middle of nowhere, with a wonderful landscape around you, but you have to have connectivity. I mean, you have to have the opportunity to be there as if you were in the city somehow, So, I mean, we're taking very much that into account, everything which is related to age people as well, which is it's full of possibilities as well. It's not only something bad, it's something very good, which can offer us a lot of economic possibilities. So that is from that point of view that you were asking the first question. Regarding the future of Europe, well, as you were saying, we have had so many black swans. Had COVID, had Brexit. We had Ukraine. Now we're having the situation in the Middle East. But what's important, however, is how we respond to this crisis. And the response hitherto has been very positive, because, I mean, we have remained united. And that is something so difficult to get, I mean, Borrell, the High Representative, always says so, which is pretty funny, He says that it's unrealistic to ask Europe to always act with one voice. For Europe is made up of many voices, but we should have to be we should be acting as a finely tuned chorus, and that is a little bit of our objective. James was talking about the 2008 financial crisis. Look at the difference with the situation now. I mean, the European Union went to the markets, issued bonds to borrow 750 billion on the financial markets to boost the recovery and supports the need, and that was the next generation funds, So, I mean, the situation is completely different, and these crises have made you bigger. But our objective is, of course, I mean, to continue with that unity, and in the same sense, I mean, the Spanish presidency has tried to follow a little bit of what was the Versailles Declaration and the French presidency as well, and trying to foresee which ones are going to be the vulnerabilities that we're going to suffer, and that was Granada with our informal council, European Council, and that's been also the summit EU-Select. I mean, you really have to grow that. It's good to have trade, but you have to extend it, and not depend on just very particular countries, I mean, you have to go further. We're very happy. I was talking about that yesterday. And this is why boosting reindustrialization and open strategic economy is the first priority. But taking into account our motto, Europe closer, I mean, you have to go to the citizens, and that's what we're trying to do as well, in our way, So that is a little bit our vision. We are coming from a very, very, very much pro-European society, and that helps a lot. We don't have a single party in all the spectrum which is really against EU, or which have a position, like a very radical that unfortunately other countries do. So for us, it's easy to be defending Europe, whatever it takes.
So for you, the sense of collective, collaborative working is a key dynamic you want to pursue. You make reference to the Resilience and Recovery Fund, right? Which has been, it has been transformative. Suddenly the EU becomes a bank, and the power dynamic changes between member state and the centre. But the reality is, most of that money is still sitting around, not doing much, because governments have not had enough project or programme activity to bring it down onto the ground, which is a bit of a shame. I'm not asking you to answer that question. What I want to know from you is, just very briefly, do you want a bigger Europe, or do you want Europe to stay the same as it is now? I'm talking about enlargement here.
talking about enlargement, well, we do need to have, well, we are very, well, we're pro-enlargement. We think that is something good. So look at, for example, I mean, talking about Ukraine, you know, I mean, I was saying so yesterday. I mean, the 1st July, first day of our presidency, our prime minister was in Kiev. And we are Spanish, far away, apparently. So, I mean, that is important. But of course, we need to have reforms, you know. We really need to discuss what's going to be the qualified majority, which ones are going to be the topics. I mean, you cannot have the same rules with 30-something countries. It's completely impossible. So we'll have to discuss about that. That is for sure.
Okay. Great, thank you. Thank you for responding to that, because I think one of the issues, I think, for a lot of those who are in the waiting room of Europe will find it really quite disturbing that the focus on rule of law and, you know, moving in the right direction when you actually look at what's happening in Europe right now, especially your neighbour Portugal and elsewhere, that you think, really? Why does it have to be why can't it just be a destination rather than reality of joining, that you work through a process? But let's come back to the question of enlargement later, but thank you very much. I want to move to Etche. Etche, where are you? You're here, aren't you? So those of you who weren't there last night will have not have received a lovely little red book. Do you want to hold it up? That she produced, that she wrote. Something that we asked Etche to produce. When we were thinking about the renewed social contract, we felt that how do you frame it in an emotional context or give it some emotion rather than just fine policy words? And what she did was to create something which I refer to as a primal scream, because it feels like a primal scream. It's a zeitgeist to, I think, how people are feeling and a kind of the language and the emotion of what people are feeling. But thank you for producing it, firstly.
Thank you, Dharmendra.
From your perspective, you know, you've written that incredible book about 10 steps to reduce a democracy or kill a democracy. You're Turkish by background. You've got that experience of working across Europe. What do you see as the key issues that are breaking that bond, that social contract between governments, private sector, and citizens? That whole kind of nexus of relationships. What's from your perspective?
Thank you, Dharmendra.
What's going on?
Good morning, everyone. I think it's going great so far, Dharmendra. Normally, I am the first person or the only person in the room who mentioned the word redistribution, and you already did. That is good. And there were other words such as authenticity, integrity, and so on. So all these things, I think, are quite applicable. What I'm going to say. If you weren't there, this little red book, which hopefully will be as popular as the actual little red book, is about what actually Dharmendra asked me now. It's about the loss of faith in politics. Malcolm sitting next to me said, I just read it and I felt like my father, what your, the Catholic education. Yeah, it reminded him the Catholic education. Yes, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm not Catholic, I'm a non-believer, but I believe in humanity, and this is what I'm trying to bring it. Why? Because I think the central problem of Europe, of global politics today, is loss of faith in humanity, loss of faith in politics itself. That is why, as James mentioned in the beginning, there is this rage, and that rage translates into right-wing populism, as some may call it, or as I call it, fascism. So either we're going to have a better, actual, real democracy with social justice in it, or we're going to go on with the theatrics of democracy that we are currently exercising, which will end up being first fascism and then barbarity, as once Rosa Luxemburg called it. So this book also says that it is either better democracy or we are in barbarian age. Unfortunately, this little pamphlet was written before Gaza happened. And I think it makes more sense, the title of it now, A Perfect Day to Be Brave, And this is calling us, all of us, to be brave. And today, being brave means what your, Belgian Vice Prime Minister Petra de Sutten just made. She called Europe to have sanctions on Israel. We are going through some strange times. As Gerd mentioned yesterday in his gala speech, even the voices who say that children shouldn't be killed are marginalized in Europe. And even me saying this, I feel the fabric of silence changing in the room. Right now, you're silent in a different way. There's like, oh, somebody's going to mention Gaza. So this is about our authenticity, as Dharmendra earlier talked about. This is about integrity. And this is about the most important crisis in Europe today. It is the moral crisis. And if Europe cannot get out of this moral crisis, what does she have? Guns? Money? Incredible technology? No. Europe is an idea. And Europe is an important idea for many people around the world. It might be establishment, it might be these cafes, corridors in Brussels, blah, blah, blah. But also Europe is Voltaire, Europe is Spinoza, Europe is Rosa Luxemburg, Hannah Arendt, Walter Benjamin, and several others who brought us the faith in humankind. So what we have to do is look at our integrity and authenticity and be brave when telling the basic moral rules, such as we shouldn't kill children. Why did we become so coward? This little pamphlet also says it talks about the second biggest problem, and that's another dirty word. In such places, it is frequently evaded. It is capitalism, ladies and gentlemen, and we have to lose our fears that Dharmendra mentioned earlier, that was put there during the Cold War, after the Second World War. We are still thinking with the taboos of the Cold War. Let's get rid of that, because this system, neoliberalism, will kill what we believe in, will kill what we are working here for, will make our lives meaningless as those people who are talking about democracy, who are working for social justice, or who are, thinking that Europe is a safe haven for free thinking and free expression. So, my last point will be, people go vote every 4 years or 3 years, 5 years, whatever. And they're asking themselves, why would I vote anyway? I cannot change anything. I cannot change my wages. So why do I have to do this part of this theater called democracy? And if we lose them, these people who have actually moral values, who actually would be fine with a better democracy with social justice in it, they are going to become not fascists necessarily, but they're going to become the material that new fascism will build upon. I have a friend who's a very well-known politician, and I told him I'm coming to Brussels and so, and he told me, why are you going there? Why are you still going there? It's establishment. They're done. It's gone. Forget about them. What's happening is on the streets now. He's a leftist politician. And I tried to convince him that there are people in European Union establishment, that they are actually really willing to speak up, and they can be brave. And I hope today I will leave this meeting knowing that, yes, there are people here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ece. Thank you very much. Thank you. As is us at Friends of Europe, we're going to go from Etche's contribution to someone from McKinsey. Who'd have thought? Yeah, I know, Mario. I had to tee you up like that because how do you follow that? And you're McKinsey, and I just wanted to make sure that for us, we've been working with you over some time. You're working with private sector companies across the world and across Europe all the time. Okay, so you have an insight that many of us don't. So I'm not going to ask you about what CEOs and others are saying at the moment about the state of the world, but from your perspective and the work you're doing, you've been coining the phrase of, how do you get people over the empowerment line? And how do we make sure that we're not talking about welfare, we're talking about empowerment? What's the kind of the difference there, but also where do you see the private sector moving, or rather, should the private, in this report we say, one of our recommendations is that the private sector should be an actor early on in the process of policy making and thinking. They should be a shareholder in developing a good society, not simply a profit maker. So over to you for kind of reacting to that, please.
Thank you, Dharmendra, and thank you for the agenda. It's always interesting to cross-fertilize and exchange views. But I will make a comment on what we call the empowerment line, because I think globally there was a lot of hype on the poverty line, which is still an important concept, no? How much money you need to survive. But we think being empowered is what matters also, at least in advanced economies. And for empowerment, we mean how much do you need to make and to spend to have access to education, to healthcare, to have a buffer of savings that if something goes wrong, the black swan that Maria mentioned, then you can not fall in poverty. And this is, I think, very relevant globally. So we calculated there are in the world 4.7 billion of people unempowered, vis-a-vis 700-800 million that are in poverty. So 4 billion more are still unempowered. And if we look at Europe, for example, this number of people is 140 million, which is 27% of the population. No? So we are not in poverty in Europe. There are exceptions, but there is no poverty. But there is a lot of lack of empowerment. So that's where I think we all should focus, and private companies will need to play a role. Now, how can we solve the empowerment gap? How can we help people to become empowered? I mean, there are two ways. One is growth. We spoke before about redistribution, which I think is very important. But if we don't generate value, we cannot distribute it. So growth, especially in Europe, in the future, can actually absorb 60% of the unempowered people. But there is still a 40%. 40% means 60 million of people. So it's a country like France or Italy, that needs to be empowered on top of growing. And this is where I think the private sector, back to your also question, Dharmendra, can play a role. One is really working on productivity. So when the private sector doesn't only create GDP, but becomes more productive, it creates higher paid jobs, and this is helpful for people to be empowered. The second way that the private sector can contribute is, let me call it reskilling. So in a world which is dynamic, it's growing, people are left behind. Also, Kari, and you mentioned it before. And skilling the workers and reskilling also people in the value chain of companies working for the suppliers is very important for them to be empowered. There is also a third way which sometimes is a bit neglected, which is product and services. What does it take to be empowered? You need to have a financial buffer, you need to have access to housing, to education. So imagine you are an insurance company. What can you do to make sure that people close to the empowerment line are actually insured, so that if something bad happens, they don't fall below the line? Or take, for example, companies in real estate. What can they do to foster social housing? So to build houses that can go in the market with a yield, with a rental that people can afford. So many companies should think about not only philanthropy, so how much do I give at the end of the year back to the society, but how can I change my products and my services to make people empowered. And let me conclude with the last contribution that private companies can do to empower people, again, beyond being productive, beyond reskilling, beyond product and services. And this is project management. Sorry, I'm at McKinsey, I need to mention project management. But companies have a lot to help with in managing projects. So if you have to build a new real estate development, it's not only money, it's not only technology, it's people, it's managing a project. So I think many companies should figure out what's the best way to use their people to run projects with the society, with the public sector also, to reduce the empowerment gap.
Marco, thank you. One of the things that we say in here is that in the deal making that happens between government and the private sector, what I mean by that is big infrastructure projects where you have public-private partnerships, which sometimes is a bit of a dirty word, other it's just profiteering because so many have failed, some have succeeded. What's your view in introducing the notion of conditionality of social clauses in public-private partnerships so that actually what you're describing is part of the contract of delivery? So you get a major contract as a private sector company to build a housing estate or a big new road or bridges, etc. But part of the deal is that you build a school with that money as too, or do something in terms of skilling. Is that kind of conversation happening? Would that be something that the private sector is up for?
I think Darmende, I think is a good example. No? So that's a good example of partnership. If you take new developments on big areas, in the past this was about how many apartments can we build and sell. I think now the narrative in Europe, in many cities, I come from Milan, that's actually what is happening to the city, is to say, okay, how much green space do we build? Because we want to have space to reforest the cities, to lower CO2. And how much of this space has to go to social housing? Because obviously there is an issue of senior housing and of student housing that cities need to solve. And at the very end, it's a win-win because you don't create good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods that are honestly something from the past, but you create areas in the city that are more interesting for everybody. And by the way, also the city are better off because if you attract, for example, students, that's an issue in many European cities because cost of living is too high for students. This is the future talent that the companies can hire to be based in those cities. No? So this kind of cooperation between private companies, public entities on real estate developments and many other areas, I think are a key component for empowering people, especially the youth.
But you think that there's currency in this concept? Do you think that there's going to be a deaf ear to the notion of having social clauses of conditionality of making social good happen as a part of getting major contracts?
I think it can happen. I think it's happening already.
Okay, all right, thanks. Was that, Maria, you going to say something there?
No.
Okay, colleagues, over to you now. We're going to invite all of you to contribute, engage. Please bear in mind that one question. What is it you want from the new mandate? What is it you'd like? Given what we've been through, and you think that this current mandate has had it pretty bad, but done not notionally well, that from the onset of it, you have COVID, then you have the financial crisis, then you have a war, and then you have what's happening now, and etc. and so forth. So it feels like responding to and adapting to crises has to be a new management style, has to be a new leadership capability. And we also need to think differently that, as I said, the 1950s model that we have has to be transformed, it has to change. But because we cannot rely on the norms that we've inherited, whether it's about how we run government, how we make money work, how do we work with citizens and others. So what is it that you'd like? What are your reactions to what you're hearing? And, in this report, we've got here some building blocks for the new mandate. I'm not going to read them out, but I hope you get a chance to look at them, because what we're saying here is that for the renewed social contract to work, you need a different mindset that's tilted towards power sharing. Sounds a bit kind of, naff or romantic, but we mean that. It's tilted towards redistribution. It's tilted towards tackling inequality and promoting equity, if you like. It is about making sure that policy making has a tilt towards making sure those who are benefiting or going to be impacted by policy are part of the solution. So it's kind of looking at community intelligence very differently. And the brain doesn't just sit within government, it sits around government and elsewhere. So, views, contributions, you just have to raise your hand. And, we already have Lubna. Have you been just kind of forced into contribution? To all of you, just introduce yourselves. Regardless of, I know you're probably all well known and you know highly regarded, but just as in the spirit of this round table, do introduce yourselves.
Thank you. I'm Lubna Bouarfa. I'm an AI scientist turned entrepreneur. So I just want to contribute. We've heard different stories from James with the gig economy to how as member states we want to drive and actually follow all the changes to stay relevant. But actually also around the war and our choices in Europe. There is one question actually for me as a scientist and as entrepreneur is how much sovereignty as states are we willing to trade for economic prosperity? And especially around the digital era. We know we've always had this trade-off. But now we know that digital platforms are becoming emperors. They have millions of users. And the time spent in those digital platforms is much more sometimes than spent in the physical world. And we somehow, as states, we accept and we only focus on the physical world and we're okay with new rules and new values in the digital world. So how much of our sovereignty we want to give away, knowing that more and more rays will come in the digital world. And we've already saw this with the internet. We already saw a lot of companies run by shareholders took key roles that states had. Yeah? So now we are moving to a new era with AI, where not only we have humans, but we have also machines making decisions. And so how are we going to balance? What role do we want? Do we want to keep, is our values number one for us? As we've heard, how can we stay authentic when we continuously feel like we need to compromise to keep our economy in balance? So what is important to us? Is our values? Is our, why are we not following the same rules as we have in the physical world, as well as in the digital world? How are we going to make our relationship with these emperors, with the big tech that is raising in all the different areas, introducing new economies, new rules, to be able to keep our identity and protect our citizens?
Lubna, thank you. That, actually, you know, raw, and it's like that changing that mindset, that value inclusive growth, as well as having a kind of a different kind of approach to how we make society work. They don't have to be mutually exclusive, but we tend to have that conversation. It's a values or competition. It's, you know, if we're going to extend the social welfare net, Europe will become anti-competitive, basically, etc. and so forth. So thank you for that contribution. I'm going to bring a lot of you in. I promise you, this is great. But I want to go to our citizen voice. It's Alessandra, first you. Introduce yourself, please.
Sure, thank you so much. My name is Alessandra Cardaci and I work at Debating Europe, which is the Citizens Engagement and Democracy Unit at Friends of Europe. We are currently running a series of consultation, participation for citizens to voice their concerns about major topics that we are discussing here today, from democracy to economy, security and climate. So you will hear also from other colleagues today in all sessions, Dharmendra said at the beginning. But I heard about moral crisis, as I mentioned. And indeed, we have someone in our focus groups, in our activities that mention that the biggest economic change today is to combine profit-making with moral duty. And this is, I think, a very interesting food for thought for today. And also, what about youth? I heard a lot of you talking about empowerment, talking about redistribution, and I think it's important to link redistribution to power. So it's not just economic distribution, but power redistribution. And what our citizens, especially young citizens, as you can imagine, tell us in our activities, which I find very important to voice and have the privilege to voice here today, is they don't feel represented. So can we blame them for not wanting to go to vote if they don't see anyone that can actually represent them? Why are political parties and institutions so difficult to access meaningfully for young people? So these are really things that I'd love to hear you commenting about throughout the day, and also maybe replying to some of our ideas. Is lowering the voting age to 16 one of the solutions? What about boosting civic education? So yeah, that's what I wanted to contribute.
Let's do this. Hands up, those of you who... No, this is not for your... That's great, wonderful. Hands up, those of you who are for lowering the age to 16 for voting. A straw poll. Not overwhelming, but I suppose getting there. Some people, and those of you who don't want to do it and want to make a comment, please do say. I'm going to now go around the room, and so I'll bring you in a moment. Firstly, Laura, introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Laura Sullivan, and I am the director of an NGO called We Move Europe. And I want to answer your question with the lyrics of a song by a band called Portishead from Bristol in the UK. So they have some lyrics that go, "Give me a reason to love you, give me a reason to be a woman." And I'm shifting that a bit to give me a reason to love EU, give me a reason to be a European. And the organisation that I work with is mobilising activists, advocates to try to change Europe in a positive way. But there's a lot of problems. And to get to the 2050 question, Europe's got to be able to look at root causes, right? It's got to look at root causes of what's going on in Europe and in the world. And when I go to meetings and I'm told by prominent commissioners that we can't ban pesticides, we can't stop exporting pesticides that are banned in Europe, but that are still going to Africa, Brazil, etc., because the chemical industry is having a hard time. We can't do that. And likewise, we can't call ourselves a Europe of values if we are paying a Libyan government to pull back people so we don't have to push them back. And there's an amazing woman speaking in the Parliament on that today. Her name's Sally Hayden. She wrote a book called My Fourth Time We Drowned. You should all read it. Very last thing is just to say we've got to be self-aware. And Karin, the minister from the Netherlands, just said, you know, who are you having coffee with, right? Well, I'll tell you who Ursula von der Leyen is not having coffee with, and it's NGOs. She's never met the Green 10. She's never met We Move Europe. And 5 minutes after Ukraine, the war broke out, one of the first meetings she had was with the representatives of oil companies. And I ask you ask people to go and vote every 5 years, but then this happens in the 5 intermittent years. That is growing seeds of Euroscepticism and the kind of fodder for fascism that Etche just mentioned.
Thank you.
We are better than this.
We are indeed. And let's hope she's listening, right? And, you know, let's hope some of the people that are advising her are watching this online, if they can. But you're quite right. I mean, you know, that's one example. It's about what I was saying earlier. There's something about the quality of leadership that we require into the future, and an emotional intelligence about the way we are in the world. And actually doing things as we've always done just won't cut it. So thank you for raising that point. But you are, you know, leading a movement to get people out to vote. Just briefly, what's your level of confidence about what might happen next year? But very brief, Laura.
About getting people out to vote?
Yeah, and what you think is going to happen?
It's going to happen again because, you know, it went up 8 percentage points last time. It's going to keep going up because people are way more awake since COVID and people see there's a need to go out and vote.
Great, thank you. You've been waiting patiently. Is there a mic? Yes, lovely. And I promise I've remembered I will bring all of you in. But I need you all to be snappy, and I'll be snappy too. Sorry.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Giedrius Surplis. I am an MP from Lithuania, and I have my colleague who is the youngest MP in Lithuania, so he will be able to tell you about the youth in politics. But, you know, I'm a Christian Democrat myself, so I'll try to be a devil's advocate. Maybe this morning, after having listened to what you've said about the mandate, I would like to address one quite short issue, I would say, but I think that's very important. You know, we have been seeing strikes in Brussels yesterday and for the days. We have been seeing strikes in Paris, in London. We see what's going on the streets of Sweden. And we are having the situation where we lack labor force, but at the same time we have pretty much the same percentage of people who do not want to go to work, and they are living on the social schemes. So this is the question. I think it should be very much addressed in the future mandate of the European Commission. How can we tie together the competitiveness of Europe, which is very much needed in the future if you see what's happening all over the world in the economy, if you see the digitalization, the artificial intelligence, the robotization coming. So where do we hit the balance between the politicians, the businesses, and the trade unions and the communities?
Okay. What about you? You're an MP. You're an MP. What are you going to do? What do you want? What will you do?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually, and
Come on,
it's coming back to what we discussed during the dinner yesterday. It's a very tough question, but I would
Why
like
is it tough?
as an MP, I have done this, and I would like to repeat it once again, and the EU should do the same.
Yeah.
Sit around one table, the businesses, the labor unions, trying to shift this mindset, thinking that yes, we should be productive. Yes, we should have life-work balance.
Yeah.
But no, we cannot be lazy because the world is after us. So where do we hit the balance? This is the question. And that's the question for the new mandate of the Commission. If they can do that, if they can change the mindsets of people, because it starts in the families of European citizens already. I mean, the children are not going to work because they are living, their parents are living on the schemes, on the social schemes.
Yeah, but
so that's the question.
But if I may, you're a public servant, you're answering my question. What would you do? Would you go for legislation? Or are you saying we do some sort of more kind of cultural engagement, outreach type of activity? Where do you stand?
It happens in Lithuania after each election, and I think it's pretty universal all over the European Union. Every government, new government, is trying to go less on the social schemes and be more transparent. And then before the elections, the new elections, it goes back to increasing the social schemes. And this is what I would like to change. And I think we all should discuss here, because the trade unions or the left politicians should also understand that somebody in the end of the day must pay for that. And it's a win-win situation. We just have to discuss that.
Okay, great. You've been waiting. I'll bring you dinner also, don't worry. And Antoine, where's Antoine from the cabinet of Nicola Schmidt? Where are you? Ah, great. I'm going to bring you in next, if I may. You haven't had your hand up, but I think it's important you're here, given what you've been discussing only last night. Great, go on.
Well, thank you very much.
Introduce yourself, please.
Yes. Jan Notterdam from CSI Europe, a network of 10,000 enterprises on sustainability and social responsibility. We are working very much on this issue of people. We're currently having men and women in companies discussing proposals that will be made also to the current and the future leaders for a more social Green Deal, making social much more explicit. Mm-hmm. It has always been the poor child in Europe. More practically, we are very much in favor of 40 years after the creation of a social dialogue to have also a sustainability dialogue. Having the NGO world, youth, academia, business, investors. There is such a wealth of solutions out there, but that is not in a bottom-up movement. It doesn't percolate enough.
Sure,
in
Jan,
the policy.
if I may. I mean, you're a really well-established outfit. You know, you have the voice or the ear of entrepreneurs, industrialists. In terms of one of our recommendations in here about the role of the private sector, what are you going to ask for the new mandate? Just briefly, what is it you and your association will be asking for?
So, one, well, we need to finalize our proposals, but
sure.
Having a European sustainability dialogue, that is key. Is it part of the reform of the treaties? Tant mieux, sinon on le fait autrement. Two, regarding capital and investments, we have a climate environmental taxonomy to flow investment to support the efforts of companies on climate environment, not on social. We have put it under the carpet.
Okay.
And there are easy solutions. And then the other point is, next to a climate scientific-based approach, it took 20 years for GIEC to have companies, governments taking this scientific approach. Can we also have a human science-based approach? Because the human factor, the human blockages even if you promote the best solutions, we need to understand not only the neuroscience, but also the other human sciences. How can we bring that intelligence in business logic?
Okay. Thank you, Jan. Antoine, what happened last night? That's not in your personal life. I'm talking about the trialogue. How did it go?
Well,
What can you share with us? Do introduce yourself, sorry, please.
yes, of course. Antoine Cazelle, I'm the head of cabinet of the European Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights, the European Commission. So last night there was a trilogue, what we call that in the European jargon, between the European Parliament, Council, and where Commission attends.
Come closer to the mic so people are saying they can't hear you.
Yes, so last night there was a trilogue, meeting between the Parliament, Council, and the Commission to discuss Platform Work Directive. And the atmosphere, I think, was pretty good. The Minister of Spain was represented, which actually is also providing a good atmosphere, because so far it was the ambassador negotiating with the Parliament. Parliament always feels that they need to have a minister in front of them. And they have been discussing a lot about this presumption of worker classification, the one which is at the heart of the Commission proposal. I think we are not, unfortunately, at the compromise at this stage, but we are getting there slowly, and there is some hope that by December there could be a deal on this directive. Now, I'm saying this, there is still some weeks to come and some discussions, but they have pretty much secured the algorithmic part, the algorithmic management part, which is the other part of this proposal, but the whole thing will be around the presumption.
What's the central issue of discontent or lack of unity?
Well, the Parliament... So, Commission came with this proposal to have a presumption of classification of worker when you are not a real self-employed. It's as easy as that. Either you are a self-employed, and that's fine, or you're not a self-employed. And that, according to national labor laws, because we don't want to interfere into national labor laws. In each member state, there is a labor code, and that labor code gives a number of conditions to be self-employed or to be a worker.
Okay.
The treaties forbid the Commission to legislate about self-employed, because before the treaties were drafted before the internet era, and so they didn't know that there would be workers cycling in the streets called self-employed. So we need to deal with that issue, but member states, they can legislate on self-employed. What we can do is to protect those who are bogus self-employed in order to become worker when they deserve to be treated as worker and have the social protection, which of course is linked to workers. So that's the Commission proposal. Council has discussed that for quite a number of months. They came to a conclusion that the presumption that we presented was, let's say, a good basis, but they have a little bit reshuffled the way this presumption worked and the conditions around the classification of worker. Now, the Parliament, they came to a completely different, let's say, planet. They wanted that everyone is a worker, and if you are not a worker, then you are maybe a self-employed. So not this presumption that we had, that actually you are a worker if some conditions are met. But they have moved along the way now, and they are coming closer to what the Commission and the Council has proposed. And so we come to something which is much more pragmatic and more practical, and also respecting labor codes of member states, because member states will not agree to go beyond that labor codes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for responding in that way. Sonia, you've been very patient. Introduce yourself briefly, but I want you to be brief as well. All of you, I'm going to bring in.
Sony Kapoor, sorry, but this is not how I normally sound like. I'm a trustee of Friends of Europe and an interdisciplinary professor of climate, geopolitics, and economics at the European University Institute. So, we are very navel-gazing, as always in Europe, and this was supposed to be a geopolitical commission. It's been a geopolitical commission without any geopolitical awareness, right? There's 8 billion people in the world, of which we are a shrinking proportion. The future of climate change will not be determined by Europe. Technology, we are an interesting, important actor, but by far not the most important one, right? And I think the inward-looking, navel-gazing discussion that excludes and ignores the fact that, for example, Nigeria, a country of 220 million people, had a 10-hour blackout of its grid electricity grid. And the electricity grid of Nigeria has the same generation capacity as the city of Austin in Texas with 1 million people, right? And even that is not able to be met. We complain about demographic decline, labor market shortages. There's 30 million Indians and sub-Saharan Africans coming into the workforce every year, of which only 4% will even be employed in the formal sector, right? To think we will reach a socially fair, inclusive, climate sustainable, environmentally friendly Europe without an awareness and a plan to deal with what are these, far larger macro issues, it's just borderline insanity, and yet it continues. To give quick example, if India reaches half the resource intensity that China has today, the world loses 2 degrees, irrespective of what we do in Europe, right? If India reaches the same resource intensity as China, we've lost 2.5 degrees. India cannot afford not to follow what remains till date the only tried and tested development model from the last century that worked for any country larger than Singapore. And we in the rest of the world cannot afford for India to do that, right? But India here is a proxy. Where is our plan? Where is the grand bargain? We, the EU, as a good faith actor, which we are eroding our reputation for with our, screwed up diplomacy, is putting on the table a bargain that is able to utilize the fact that the vast majority of natural resources, human ingenuity, human talent, human capital lies out there. And those are exactly the things we are short of. We have a lot of money. We have a lot of asset managers. We've got a lot of intellectual property and technology. And the two can be put together in a way that the world can reconcile growth, welfare increase, fairness, while still keeping us in at 2 degrees and beginning to tackle biodiversity. But recognizing that we are only one increasingly shrinking part of an economy, a global economy of 8 billion people and rising, I think is an absolute first step.
But thank you very much. Obviously, had a currency. Both of you have been really, really patient, and I know you both wanted to come in. So do you want to come in first? Do introduce yourself, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Agnieszka Łukaszczyk, and I'm a vice president for government affairs at Planet. We are we're a company with the largest constellation of Earth observation satellites, and I wanted to talk a little bit today because we're talking a lot about being competitive and making profits, but also holding on to our values and taking care of humanity. And actually, you can do both. We are a mission-driven company, and actually, we are listed on New York Stock Exchange as a public benefit corporation. I don't know if you know this sort of animal. It's very rare. There are literally only, I think, 12 companies in the world that are listed like this. I think Patagonia was the first one. It's a choice for a company to do that. And what that means is that you are legally obliged to adhere to your mission. Our mission is to help life on Earth, as cheesy as it sounds, but that means that this satellite technology can be only used for positive impact for the humankind. And so we're legally obliged not just to bring profits to our shareholders, but we actually have to sometimes make tough business decisions that when we have business opportunity that could potentially be harmful to humans, we have to say no to that business opportunity, even though that would bring a lot of profits to us and our shareholders. So industry can be positive. You can make money and look yourself in the mirror every day at the same time. You don't have to really choose to either be profitable or be a good citizen, a good player. We all have to play a role. All these issues that we're talking about.
But but isn't that about personality and approach and leadership rather than...
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean...
We can't regulate for, really, can we? So
no.
What do you want from the next mandate, just very briefly, if there's anything at all?
I would like to have a little bit... I think this is a very naive statement that I'm about to say, but I would like to, for the next policymakers, decision makers, to really look at the big picture, because these problems that we're discussing are global. We're not just gonna. We need to take out the politics and think about really solutions, if we can.
Naivety isn't a bad thing. We seem to lose our imagination as well. So, you very briefly. Please introduce yourself.
Marisa Monteiro Borsbrom, I'm here in my head of Women in Tech Global Movement, and the word I didn't heard yet is women. So let's maybe face that the great minority of Earth is still not at the table, or when it's at the table is never being heard at the same level. So if I am a European citizen, I want to say in this table that we want to bring children with 16, even with their great value, of course, but we still didn't fix the women participation, either in politics, either in their own citizenship. Empower women in tech is empower women also in their participation. So I urge the European Union to keep working in women participation in Europe as a very, very key point for our progress.
Are you for quotas? Are you for quotas?
I was
Just
not,
yes or no,
I
are you
was
for-
not as a young woman, I am now.
Okay, great. Now, colleagues, I have been told that I have got no more time left. But I'm going to ignore that only for a little while, so don't kill me, organisers, please. But I'm going to ask those of you who've been so patient to be 60 seconds in your contributions, if I may. Otherwise, I'll eat into your coffee break, and then the day will crash. I do this every year, so I do apologise. So I'm going to literally point at you, and you can make a quick contribution.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Andrea Pagliosi, I work for Edwards Life Sciences. I think I belong to the minority of for-profit organization here, so I want to just make the disclaimer up front and in the life sciences. Two things. What I've understood from this discussion is definitely we want to all live in a better world, for sure. I think more inclusive, better life, strong redistribution of wealth and health, so fantastic. I don't think that no one in the street would say I'm against that. So to your question, there must be an effort on more granularity, or more granular approach. Next mandate is the next 5 years. So changing the entire world in 5 years, if we haven't done in centuries, we can accelerate for sure, but we have also to look to whom we are asking. We are asking to a commission, to a parliament. They have powers that are also limited, but they can be strong. So they can contribute directionally to the big changes. By the end of the day, you have to see what they have. 3 major topics on the table. They will run all the legislation on healthcare, pharmaceutical, and other things, for sure. They have this. This can be an important change in healthcare, how it's organized in Europe. They have all the the European health data space, so all the digital is a dossier, is a file that they have to conclude. How they will do directionally will impact the next 20 years, most probably, if no more, and the Green Deal. Already, if we are able to move on these 3 major dossiers in the next 5 years, in the direction that has been indicated here, more inclusive, more, that type of discussion should happen. Otherwise, we have the ambition to change the entire world, but we don't use the tangible instrument that we have in our mind. In my world, is let's move from diagnosis to therapy.
Well done, sir. Microphone here, please.
My name is Adem Kumcu. I represent an organization representing migrant entrepreneurs through Europe. And my point is that the biggest challenge in the world today is an aging population everywhere and what Gaia Vince names the nomad century. Migration means a reality in Europe, super diverse cities, and what I want, what we all want, I think, is an inclusive, participative, and responsive democracy. Art of living, working, and governing together. A mind shift towards dividend of diversity, believing and a faith in a creative power of diverse citizens. And last but not least, I will say less hierarchy, less markets, more network organizations, more ecosystems where the citizens have a voice.
Okay.
That will be my point.
No, thank you. You've been patient. I would urge you to read this. Yeah. So the foundation blocks. We say the first one very clearly: the diversity of the union should be celebrated as an economic, political, and global asset. So it's there. Very briefly.
Thank you. Isabelle Durand, I'm a former Vice President of the European Parliament and now engaged in the UN. Just one elephant in the room, and following what you said, I think that migration is part of the social contract. Migration means, of course, dignity, access to work, but also capacity to apply properly the migration compact for safe migration. And what is happening in our cities everywhere in Europe today is something which has to be changed. And I expect that the next Commission and the next elected people could really address this question properly. I know that the Commission is trying to do its best with Dublin issues, etc., and the problem is often in the Council. But I mean that it has to be done in relationship between what is happening nationally in the country and what is doing or what is not doing on European level. But I think that it's our responsibility to put that in the social contract of the next
Isabel, thank
step.
you very much. I've been told I have to close down, but you have both been very patient. So, but literally has to be 60 seconds, if not. Introduce yourself quickly.
Thank you very much. My name is Marek Havrda. I'm Deputy Minister of European Affairs of the Czech Republic, but I'm speaking now in my personal capacity as a European citizen. I would like to see two things from the mandate. One is the realization that we really need to work on creation of value. It has been mentioned here. Before we redistribute anything, we have to create a value. And the realization needs to be that we need to do much more together as Europe as such, not as individual member states. I'm talking about taxation, but as well foreign policy. Much more needs to be done. This will require very difficult decisions in the capitals, and we're not yet there. So this is the first one. Second is on AI. I would like to see really huge initiative on AI. AI is clearly a very promising technology. It's a game changer everywhere. It will help us to sort out both scientific and technological challenges, but as well could help us to sort out or at least address societal challenges as demography. We need huge initiative to invest and to really be part of the world, which is not lagging behind, maybe not in research at the moment, but definitely in deployment and innovation, but the part of the world which is really leader in innovation and implementation of AI. The first initiative of the president on the support of high-performance computing for the startups is great, but it's just very small. We need much, much more. Thank you.
But we also need to make sure that actually politicians know what they're talking about. And what I mean by that is have those who are engineers, hackers, etc., those who are creating algorithms around the table making the decision with you. I'm not asking you to respond to that.
I would like to, because I just came from AI startup to do the job I'm doing.
Okay. That's good to know. That wasn't a comment on you, but you are very, very in the margin, you're marginal in terms of the actual experience of politicians on this subject matter. Last comment.
Thank you. My name is Oana Tsoiu. I'm a Romanian member of the parliament, former chairwoman of the Labour and Social Protection Committee.
And the European Young Leader.
And the European Young Leader, thank you so much. Grateful to be here. But I want to go back to the start of the conversation, which is how do we take the leap from 2030 to 2050? And if we talk about 2050, then we need to acknowledge the fact that a lot of the gig economy of food delivery or car driving, it's not going to be there anymore. We're going to have a huge automation of a lot of the work that is happening across the European Union, which means that we're going to have a huge amount of value, financial value, that is not connected directly with labor. And that means that we're going to have more political decisions, not less political decisions. More money on the table, more rules that need to be defined and redefined. So I want to close with maybe putting optimism a bit back into politicians. I think the solution is more politics, in a sense in which I think the solution is having more votes. Having citizens, European citizens, vote for the national parliaments where they have residency everywhere across the European Union. Maybe we actually give a chance to the transnationalists for the European Parliament. I don't think it's by chance that the European Parliament has a stronger stance on the worker side because they are directly voted, and I think that makes them a bit closer to those issues than the Commission. So I think, politics is not perfect, but I think it's also dangerous to say politicians should be replaced by citizens, as challenging as the conversation was last night.
Yeah. Sure, thank you. I don't think that's what we're saying. And, there's a vested interest to a certain extent in some of the comments, right? This is not about that. When you look at the quality of leadership we've experienced, especially in the past 5 years, at the most senior level, Trump and, others and beyond, what's happening right now in parts of Europe, what we're saying is that if we're not going to lose, is what Etche was saying, if we're not going to lose the heart, mind and soul of citizens, not to become cynical, we need to have a different caliber of leadership.
And sorry, I know you're going to hate me for reacting, and I know we don't have the time, but I fully agree with what you said. Only the thing that I'm saying is that it depends what do you put the light on. And we keep putting a light on the faults and the problems of politics that are there. I'm not denying them.
Okay.
But we are within the European Union, which is a political decision. It did not came from citizens and it did not came from the private sphere. The union itself is a political decision. And what I'm saying is more light needs to be put on that as well.
Sure. Colleagues, I've run out of time. I've run into your coffee break. I'm so sorry. Thank you all very much. Thank you. We've basically skirted some of the issues, but I hope that we've created an emotional energy in the room to do better and go further and think differently. This is the kind of collaborative space we need